Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Marilyn Shannon, and this is Breaking Free, and I'm so delighted to have you here today. I do know that your time is really precious, so I'm really happy to have you join us today, as I always am. And with that, let me just welcome Amnon. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, and you?
I'm just
I
fine.
think we say that every single time.
Peachy.
I think we need to change how we say that.
What?
I don't know. We
Oh,
just
I'm
keep
real
saying that.
tired.
No, I
No.
like it the other way better.
Okay.
So Amnon is our producer, and we're happy to have him here as always. And just want to let you know that during the show, please feel free to call in anytime you like. If when the mood just strikes you and you want to call in, please do that. You can call us at 919-518-9773, or you can Skype in with us on Skype Voice to computers. That's plural 2K Voice. And also, we have a chat. So if you would like to take part in what's going on in there, and there seems to be a lot of stuff going on in there already, just next to the video, just write your name, nickname, whatever name you want people to know you by, and just put your name in there, and you can take part in whatever conversation is going on. We'd love to have you. So, it's interesting. Every week, we find the most extraordinary people to share with you here. People who are breaking free on all kinds of levels, helping people break free, have a tool, a strategy, some story that they share, and just in that very moment, it captures the essence of something that changes us forever. So today we're going to be talking about this book, a story, a love story, something that I think is destiny. I think the whole thing is made in heaven, and we're going to just explore everything that there is to learn about this book, Finding Zoe. And there's a woman who I met, a couple of months ago on my playing on Google Plus, who has joined my show there called Skywire, which is all about listening. And her name is Gail Harris, and she is the co-author of the book Finding Zoe. And the interesting thing about Gail is that our show is all about listening, and we dissect it on every level that we can imagine. And yet Gail has done something extraordinary. She has written this book that she's co-authored with Brandy, and Brandy is deaf. So how she's written this book, how she's come up with the information, how she's been inspired is extraordinary. So let me welcome her to our Breaking Free stage and let her explain to you about this book, her life, and all the intricacies that have come together to have made this happen. So, Gail, hey,
Hey, Marilyn.
how are you?
I'm doing great. Great to
Good.
be here with you today.
It's good to have you here. And Gail is an award-winning author already, and then took on this project of Finding Zoe. So why don't I just turn it over to you? Why don't you give our audience some background information about you and this project?
Sure. Okay. Well, I wrote my first book several years back, and it was actually a self-help, which is very different than co-authoring somebody's memoir. And that book is entitled Your Heart Knows the Answer, and it teaches you how to trust your own inner wisdom, trust the voice of your heart, and learn how to distinguish it between your thoughts, your emotions, and all that inner chatter that we have running around inside our heads. And that's a very important topic to me. Most of my writing is centered around that and aspects of connecting in with our spirituality in everyday life, and we have to do that by listening. So one of the reasons why I love being on Skywire with you. And so with this particular project, I actually, I answered an ad. I'm a member of the Editorial Freelancers Association, and I saw an ad there. Brandy Raris, my co-author, who, Marilyn, as you said, she is a deaf woman and a former Miss Deaf America. And she had placed an ad in the online Editorial Freelancers Association, a job posting, say that she wanted somebody to help her to write the story about her daughter Zoe's amazing adoption. And I am an adoptive mother myself, so I was very drawn to this ad. I had wanted to write about adoption someday. I think of my experiences of adopting my son at birth as really like my own private miracle. And I had wanted to write about adoption someday. And especially in the context of writing about it in terms of following our heart and following our intuition, which is really how I live my life. So, but I didn't feel that it wouldn't really work for us, for me to write about my son's own personal experiences and my personal experiences with him. So I didn't know if I'd ever get the chance to write about adoption through that lens until I saw this ad from Brandy. And I was immediately drawn to it right away. And somehow out of, I think she said she had about 100 people respond to help her with the project. And somehow I convinced her to work with me. And it really turned out to be a journey that it's been the most incredible journey of my life. And I'll just say right now that, so we started out talking about this. It was an incredible adoption story. Her little daughter, Zoe, who she adopted and who is 10 years old now, when Brandy and her husband, Tim, adopted her at 8 months old, it was the 5th home that Zoe had been in those short 8 months of her life. I mean, the 5th home. And so she knew that there was an amazing story behind this, but she didn't know exactly what it was. And so as I began interviewing all the cast of characters in the story involved with the adoption, but also started interviewing Brandy and her husband, Tim, in particular, we really found out that the book itself, was so much more than just this incredible adoption story, which it could have been a book on its own, but there was so much more there that needed to be told. And so that's really, the book ended up to be Brandy's memoir, actually. So
I mean, I read the book and I really did love it. I had a lot of times in there where I had to kind of catch myself because I was going to start to bawl, and I didn't, and that was okay. I was in my house, but it was very interesting, and it was a good. I mean, I think I want to talk about a lot of things during the show. I want to talk about the writing process. I want to talk about how you wrote a book when you worked with this woman, and do you sign?
No, I don't.
Okay. And how you did that, how you expressed yourself, how she expressed herself, because isn't that an extraordinary situation? Because, I mean, all of us, we talk to people all day long that we're in the talking culture, right? We're not in the signing culture. We're in the talking culture, and we can't communicate. So I think there's a lot of stories here that we can talk about. We talk about the writing process, talk about the communication process, talk about this love story that was created between all these members of all these people that held Zoe up for all this time, all those different homes that loved her. And then the destiny where Brandy felt the mother, the adoptive mother, her true mother, I guess, knew all her life that she would have a baby girl. She had 4 boys. She birthed 4 boys.
3 boys.
3 boys, excuse me, 3 boys. And then to adopt Zoe. So there's several stories here that I would love to talk about. And I think one of the first things I would like to ask, and then you by all means chime in, but one of the first things is this communication between you and Brandy, which was, how did you do that? How did you get, and I have to say, I've read a lot of books in my life, but this really captured so much emotion and from so many people that you did an extraordinary job of being able to do that. So, talk some about that process.
Sure. Well, you just said a lot. There, there is so much to talk about, so many things to say. So, okay, in terms of working with Brandy, well, it was interesting because when I responded to that ad, it was via email initially. So we had gone back and forth, and she didn't even tell me that she was deaf initially. We were just going back and forth. And so eventually she did tell me that she was deaf, and she said that she didn't think that the fact that she was deaf and that Zoe was deaf had anything to do with the story at all. She really wanted to tell this incredible adoption story, how Zoe had been in 5 different homes. And she really didn't see herself being in the story very much at all. Obviously, she's Zoe's mother, so she had to be in the story where where necessary. But so there was that. Okay, but then so how we worked together was initially it was via sign language interpreter over the phone. And so deaf people they use something called VRS, and it's video relay services. And the way it worked is that she uses a video phone. So the same way that we're Skyping now, deaf people use a video phone. So they would see each other signing on the phone, and so on the video phone. So she would see the interpreter voicing to me what she was saying, and then the sign language interpreter would speak to me over the phone and tell me what Brandy, voice for Brandy, what she had told me. And then she would listen to me speak, and then she would sign back to Brandy. So this sounds very complicated, but it all happens pretty seamlessly. And we worked together that way for the first several years. And we've been actually working on this project together now. And we're going on, this is like the end of the 5th year, because it's turned into, it took many years to write the book because it's very complex. And then we were looking for a publisher, and that took some while. We had one publisher, then got out of the contract, found another. And then this past year, we've been promoting the book. So now we actually use GoToMeeting, so we see each other. We don't use the phone as much anymore because it's more difficult on the phone. But that's how we did it initially. And one thing I have to say about the fact that Brandy is deaf is that, it just didn't matter at all. That was the thing that, and I was always struck by this because Brandy was brought up as a deaf person. She was actually born hearing, lost her hearing at 6 years old, but brought up as a deaf person. I was brought up as a hearing person. So we came from, different worlds in a sense. But the bottom line was when we got down to work, we just got down to work and got down to it. On a certain way, I felt like I just had found my long lost sister. I mean, I really was, I was the person that was supposed to write this book. I mean, I'm just really clear about that. That's what the listening says. And so that was very profound for me. And it just showed me once again how much more alike we all are than we're really different, And, I felt that awareness informed my writing. To tell Brandy's story. So there was that piece, and I can go on, but I feel like I want to just stop now. Why don't you ask me? Because I can go on and on.
Oh,
I can write a book about writing the book, honestly.
I know. So there's something extraordinary about this for you. I mean, the fact that you are a mother, that you did adopt. I mean, the whole story. So what about the story? Just if you think about one thing that just gets you each time, what is that one thing about this story?
Oh gosh, Marilyn, no, there are so many things, but I'll say this. I think it was being a hearing person. I'd actually never met a deaf person before, and so part of the research in doing this book was to research deaf history. I never knew anything about deaf history. And what I found out it was just an absolute revelation to me, what deaf people have gone through to become, and I could almost just cry right now. Sometimes I think maybe I was deaf in a former life, but actually I do have a hearing loss. I do have a small hearing loss. It's sort of an interesting thing, a coincidental thing. But deaf people have gone through so much just to be able to be treated like they weren't second-class citizens, and I never knew anything about this. And the story itself, deaf history in and of itself, like I said, is just so shocking. But then on top of that, to find out the major role that Brandy and her husband Tim played in the involvement of deaf history at the most crucial time in deaf history. Brandy was Miss Deaf America at this profound turning point in the lives of deaf people. And so I felt like this book was just handed to me, and I felt that if I felt this way, that I was so touched and moved, and it was such a revelation to me, what I learned about deaf people and Brandy's life, that it would be a revelation to other people as well, to other hearing people, the mainstream. And it just became my mission. I felt like I was just on a mission, that I had to get this story out there. I had to just tell this story because of the deaf story. But then there was so much more to the story as well that relates to the fact that Brandy is deaf. So just the whole synchronicity and how all these lives came together. The story itself, there was this incredible adoption story, which was really the lives of 5 people and how their lives became intertwined, and also became intertwined with Brandy because of the love of Zoe, because of the love of this
She's
little
an
girl.
incredible, when I read the story and just reading about Brandy, how incredibly open-minded she is to have been able to include in this child's life the birth mother, the birth father, the foster care family, the family that was going to adopt her first. It was very inclusive on how she is so secure in herself that she was fine, with including all these loved ones. And I mean, I looked at the picture of Zoe and her birth mother, when the birth mother was actually getting married, and I just wanted to bawl. The pictures that you chose to put in the book was just fabulous. So you know what? Let's show Can we show the cover? Let's show the cover of the book so you all get an understanding of the book that we're talking about. So that's Finding Zoe. And I don't want to tell you the story, but I can tell you that as Gail was saying, the history, just to know how people felt, about deaf people, and how they didn't consider them to be very intelligent. And there was this whole thing about Alexandra Bell and all these things that I would never have even thought about. And I think that's part of the extraordinary nature of being open to be free and open to not knowing, and how when you do take a step back and you do learn and you partake in this world and in this life, we only free ourselves up and expand our circle, expand our heart, expand our life, which is exactly what, I would never have thought about these things, about, a deaf family, or, adoption maybe some, but not what people go through. The torture of what people go through and going through all these things was just, this is a really cool book. So I highly recommend, everybody read it, and we'll talk more about that. But it was just, everything about it was just so emotional. And I think, Gail, you have just a wonderful way of capturing that, because when you're dealing with an interpreter, how did you know that the interpreter was actually, the thing, because when you're signing or whatever you're doing in a different language, to be able to express that, the emotion, the words, the sentiment, everything back and forth, that's incredible to me.
Yeah, well, Brandy and we did a lot of emailing back and forth. So I really felt like I just had a sense of who Brandy was. It was just something, like I said, it really was, we were just meant to collaborate on this project together. And so when I would listen to the sign language interpreter, and there was always a different sign language interpreter also. We don't always have the same one. So some were better than others, just how is
that
it
made
like?
it even more, didn't that make it even more challenging, that they didn't even know what had happened before?
Well, I remember one time we got on the phone, right? And it was a really bad interpreter, and Brandy, she just texted me and she said, hang up, we have to get another sign language interpreter. And we did, it's really hard to be a sign language interpreter. And let me just say that ASL, American Sign Language, I just hope someday that I can learn the language. It is an extraordinary language. And linguists, in a certain sense, actually consider ASL to be more of a so-called language than English. Actually, there's what goes into making a language. It has certain characteristics, like there's grammar and pronunciation and lexicon, or the words that you use. And so ASL actually has 4 of those characteristics, where English only has 3, because ASL actually has motion and movement. So it's an incredible language. And I sort of got off track here, but I felt like I knew Brandy well enough, and I would get the transcripts back. And so I would read over the transcripts, and of course I would send them to Brandy, and she would, see them as well to know. And she, if anything was ever off sync or not right, she would let me know about it. But it really wasn't much of an issue in terms of the sign language interpreter, in terms of getting the information from Brandy. I think what was more difficult actually was once the book was written and we got into the promotional things and we had to go back and forth and we had to really speak really clearly to each other. There were issues that we had to, the business end of it. We just had to make sure that we were seeing eye to eye and we understood each other completely. That was a challenge more than the actual interviewing. I got the story down, and it really wasn't an issue.
So I'm a little confused because it says that you're the co-author, but as I read the book, it was always in Brandy's voice. So can you explain what the difference is, or how that makes you the co-author?
Sure, that's a great question, and it can be confusing, especially a co-author is a joint collaboration, and 2 people work together to write a book, and so that is the case with this. But this is Brandy's memoir, and it's her story, and she's telling her story. So the way that I felt, or that we both felt, that the story would be told most powerfully if it was told in the first person. So I wrote this book, we wrote it together. Brandy was right there alongside with me, but we just were so in sync that really I would just write a chapter and I would send it to her, and she was like, yep. Everything seemed really right. So I'm the co-author in a sense that this was a true collaboration of hearts and minds. From the very get-go, Brandy and I worked hand in hand, and I, as the writer, I was intricately involved in the development of the story. As I said before, as I began my interviewing all the cast of characters in the story, pretty early on, it became very clear to me that I recommended to Brandy that we expand the story from what she had originally wanted to tell, which was this amazing adoption story. But when I saw the whole deaf aspect of it, she didn't really think that the fact that she was deaf initially had anything to do with the story. But once I began interviewing her, I just saw, no, this is so much bigger. And so she was completely aligned with that. I mean, she got that right away. And then I also felt, as I listened to everybody tell their story, I also felt that the story would be most powerful if told from a particular perspective, a perspective that I call the lens of perfection. And we could get into that a little bit later. But Brandy was right on board with that. In fact, I think it's what she had always wanted. And so again, we just really worked very, very closely to find the highest expression of what this story should be. It really was a true collaboration of the heart and minds. It was a very profound experience for me. And again, I just also do want to add that even though it is the story is about Brandy's life, in a sense, it was a very personal experience for me to write the story. And I could talk about that a lot. But very briefly, I guess I'll just say this lens of perfection that I felt would be best to tell the story through. It was really an opportunity for me to write about my own spiritual views and perspectives on life, which is the focus of my life. And to be able to do that through the telling of Brandy's story, in a certain way, I felt like it was almost my story as well, in a certain sense, embedded in those pages. So it was a true collaboration.
It's,
I hope that answers your question.
It does. And I think when you're all listening to this, I think sometimes you really have to just kind of close your eyes And you have to really hear what Gail is saying as far as how this project, I mean, the book is great and the information is great. The historical information is great. Learning about Brandy is great. Learning about all the players, the birth mom, the birth father, their relationship. I mean, it was just the foster parents. I mean, I always thought, oh, foster parents. But then I read this and how divine it was that this foster parents had a child that they adopted that also was deaf, which just turned out to be what I would call a coincidence, right? Haha. But when you listen to Gail talk, as I am, and I know you are, you hear that this is written in a very different way than most books are written. And that's why she feels very comfortable in saying she's the co-author, not the ghostwriter, not this, not that, because there was this blending of spirits to write this book, even though, I mean, it just appears so different, but it is a blending of spirits. It's quite unusual, I think.
Yeah, it really is so. It is unusual. And it's been such a profound experience for me to write this book. It was interesting. I was on a show, a Google Plus Hangout on Air. It was called Face the Book. This was several months back. I wasn't really allowed to talk about the book that much. We weren't really even ready to start publicizing it yet. But it was through my experience writing the book. So it wasn't so much telling what the story was about. It was more my story about writing Finding Zoe, which is partly what this is about today too. But anyway, at one point, Charlotte Pierce, who was the host, she had asked me to read an excerpt from the book. So I actually read the first 2 pages of the book from chapter 1. And I found myself actually almost welling up in tears from reading this story. And how many times, first of all, I had written it several years ago. I mean, time had passed already. I must have read that excerpt 100 times. I wrote it. I'd read it so many times. And there I was practically in tears. And, I thought about that a lot because it wasn't even about me. It was actually the first part, really, those first 2 pages talks about Brandy's experience when she was in the hospital. She had contracted spinal meningitis. And the story just starts out when she's basically in the operating room about to get a spinal tap at 6 years old. And I thought about this, and here I was practically crying. And I thought, gosh, it wasn't me in the hospital about to get a spinal tap and to lose my hearing. And for so long, I wondered, why am I so affected by this whole experience? I mean, it's a book. I wrote a book, and it's a great book, and it's a great story, but it has just been so profound for me.
Mm-hmm.
I could talk more about that.
Okay, and I have a couple of questions on the chat, but
sure.
I guess I want to ask you, so the most profound thing was what? What if you could identify the most profound one thing that you have gotten from this experience, what would that be? What's the message for the world? What is one message, profound message that you got from writing this book?
I would say that things are divinely orchestrated.
Okay.
That there is an order to this life, to this crazy life, if we open ourselves to see it, if we allow ourselves to see it. And just as, Zoe went through 5 different homes and people went through such heartache and agony. She was given up by 4 parents,
Yeah.
4 parents who loved this little girl very much. They actually rejected her. And so much judgment could have happened around that and did happen,
Right.
But when you see the end and how Zoe truly ended up to be where she really needed to be, she was divinely led to find the home that was her true home. And that was one piece of it. But, Marilyn, it doesn't stop there because you're talking about like what was so profound for me. And so what was profound for me is that I think all of our lives like that were like that. And it was in this writing process for me, it was actually it was almost hard to see where the story began and where the story ended, excuse me, and the telling of it or the writing of it began, because it just seemed like a continuation. It's like, Zoe ended up in the perfect home, and Brandy felt that she had to write this story, and I had this incredible, profound experience with adopting my own son. And so here I was, the perfect person to tell the story. It never stops. And here, Marilyn, I met you through our listening chat, through our listening program, and here we are talking about it. It's like we're all connected. Our lives are all connected, and we're all intertwined, and we're all a part of each other. And we can either see that or not. I mean, we can close our eyes to that, but I think that when we see that, the awareness of that, I think, is so profound. And I think it's what gives our life meaning. And I think that's why it was so profound for me to write this story, because I believe in this. I believe in that, if you want to say spiritual truth or spiritual concept, with all my heart, but it's not like I believe it because somebody told me. I believe it because I've experienced that. And it's a guiding force in my life. And so to be able to tell this incredible story through that lens, I think the message itself is profound, and I think me telling it is profound for me in terms of my life path. And does that make sense?
Yes, and I think it's very interesting to conceptualize sometimes that, we have an agenda, or we think we have an agenda. And the most beautiful thing is being able to toss that agenda out the window because something else is speaking to you greater, and to allow that to be, in all of our lives for as much of our life as we can do it. I think once you read the book, and I would highly recommend it, once you read the book, you're going to see how you're going to see exactly what Gail is saying on how the stories of all the players and how connected they were, and how the divine intervention and all this kind of stuff. It just, sometimes you look at something and you go, there's one instance, right? But when you find multiple instances that prove that there's something else happening, then you're like, wow, this is really cool. So let me ask you something. So Chris is asking if you will explain what the lens of perfection is a little bit more.
Oh, sure. Well, okay, I may repeat myself, but it's like what I said. I feel that there is an order to this crazy life. And, some people may explain this by saying that things happen for a reason, or that things are meant to be. And I would agree with that, but I would also say the way I would describe it is that we get what we need in this life. It may not be what we want, and we may not see at the time that it's happening. When something really painful is happening, it's really hard to take a step back and say, oh, wow, look how perfect this is. This is really, I really needed this, or there was something really here for me to learn. But I do believe that that's true. And that's what I was referring to when I say the lens of perfection.
Okay, so that's your lens of perfection, is seeing things that way, right? Is that what you're saying? Okay. And then Suziani is asking if you would read an excerpt from the book.
Oh, sure.
So read us an excerpt of, like, a favorite part, or whatever you just open up right now that you think is just extraordinary.
Okay, if you just give me a second, because I have to go get it.
Yeah, I actually, Suziani, you're so funny. Ooh. Okay, so here we go. Are you ready?
Well, you know what? I'm trying to decide which there's so.
Okay, well, you know what I would say.
Yeah.
For as in keeping with what we're talking about, just put your finger there and open something up. And
Well,
just
I think
trust.
I'm gonna do.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm gonna just do the part that I that I did before.
Okay.
Okay, let me just get to it. And thank you for asking. I appreciate this. And we'll see if I start crying this time. Okay. The blinding light is what I remember most. I wanted to put my hands over my eyes, but was too weak to do so. It was 2 a.m. I was lying face up in the emergency room, more scared than I can say. I don't remember much else before being electrocuted, or so it felt. But I do remember the doctor turning me over, pushing aside my hospital gown, and rubbing my lower back with alcohol. I can smell it now. Then came the blow, a sharp prick, sending excruciating shockwaves excuse me, up to my head and down to my toes. I let out a scream, which my mother, who was outside in the hallway, couldn't bear to hear. I was only 6 years old. The doctor had given me a spinal tap, and there was nothing left for my mother to do except swallow her tears and wait for the results. Thus began 2 weeks of hell for her, and 2 weeks of drifting in and out of sleep rather peacefully for me. The days leading up to that night, when I was burning up with a fever, had been much worse for me. I remember reaching into the freezer for ice cubes to put on my forehead. It was March 1974. I was in kindergarten. We lived in Naperville, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago. My mother had already taken me to the doctor, who said that I had a bad flu, but that I would be okay. He was so wrong. The day she took me to the hospital, I had been lying on the living room couch. My mother had come over and sat down next to me. "How's my sweetie?" she asked. I shook my head. She kissed me on the forehead and then went into the kitchen to talk to my father. "Bill, call the babysitter to cancel," she said. "We can't go out tonight." They had theater tickets for a show that was playing in Chicago. My mother came back to me and took me upstairs to my room. I must have fallen asleep because I remember waking up hours later and feeling like I was going to die. I called my mother. She came running into my room. "Mom, I don't feel good," I told her. "Can you put your chin to your chest?" "It hurts," I told her after trying. She couldn't remember how she knew to ask that question, but remembered that if the answer was no, it was a very bad sign. I was wearing my favorite pink and white pajamas, and she picked me up, wrapped me in a blanket, and then took me to the hospital while my father stayed home with my brother Brian, who was a year and a half younger than me. The doctor who admitted me said that it looked like I had spinal meningitis, but that the spinal tap would confirm his diagnosis. About an hour after my mother heard me scream, the doctor came into the waiting room to talk to her. "Mrs. Sculthorpe, please sit down." My mother's heart skipped a beat. "It's spinal meningitis, a very bad case. We're doing everything we can, but you need to be prepared. We're not sure if she'll make it through the night." That's when my mother turned to the doctor and said, "She will not die, doctor. She will not die." Years later, those words would make me stronger.
Thank you for reading that. And I think that's kind of like the crux of how Brandy goes through her life. I mean, this is not going to get me. This is just not going to get me. I'm going to be okay. This is not going to get me.
She's an extraordinary human being, Brandy. She really is. I want to mention one thing that you said before about about the adoption story and about the openness and about, putting the agenda out the window. You were mentioning that before. And Brandy had always said that in terms of her being open enough to have Zoe's birth mother, Jess, and birth father, BJ, and the first adoptive parents, Stanley and Stefan, and the foster parents as well, to have them a part of Zoe's life. And Brandy always said, there's enough love to go around. And when she said that, I just felt like, yeah, she's my kindred spirit, because I feel the same way, whether you're adopted or not. It doesn't matter what the situation is, that there is enough love to go around, whatever the circumstances. And I felt that way with my own son's adoption. as well. We have what is called an open adoption. So my son's birth mother, we haven't seen her lately in the last couple of years. The relationship changes, but when you have an open adoption, that means that your child's birth parents, in some way, shape, or form, are involved in your life. And being involved in adoption circles, I always felt that I wanted that for my son Lucas, because I always felt like Brandy too. She didn't want Zoe to have any questions, and I felt that way for my son as well, because I felt like, if you imagine being born and you knew that you were actually born, you grew in someone else, the way we said it all these years with Lucas is that he grew in somebody else's tummy. And I always thought that, and the reading that I've done, that if you're an adopted person, that there could be some sort of like an unanswered question. It's like a primal thing. I mean, where did I come from? And I never wanted Lucas to have any questions about that. And there's been a lot of people that say open adoption is a bad thing. It's controversial, but I know that Brandy felt the same way for Zoe. And people had said to me as well, like, aren't you afraid that the birth mother is going to want to, take their child back? And people had asked that to Brandy as well. And I'm like, no, I felt the same way that she did. Like, I know that I'm my son's mother. I mean, there's no question about it. And I could relate to her in that sense too. I think the epilogue ends, Brandy is saying how she had always yearned for a daughter. And that's part of what this story is about. She gave birth to 3 sons, but she just, like, no, I'm supposed to have a daughter. I'm supposed to have a daughter. And at the very end of the book, she says, she's talking about just the perfection or the miracle of how she and Zoe found each other. And she said that, and the fact that I never had a biological daughter, and the fact that Zoe came to us through adoption just proves to me more like how this was meant to be, and proves to me that I am this girl's mother, and I always identified with that.
Yeah, I think it's just so interesting. I mean, I can't be walking in your shoes, obviously, to know how you feel. I mean, I have stepchildren, and I feel very close to them. And thank God that they have a mother, so maybe that makes it different. But I think it's just, I mean, love is love, right?
Yeah.
Love is love, and when you get that close to someone, it's just, what else can you ask for? So, in having an open adoption, I would imagine that the reason it's controversial is because of more people are scared than are not. More people are scared
No, I was just going to say there's bad press there, in the back. In the past, there's been bad press. You don't hear about all the wonderful things, but you would hear about the one, I don't know what it was, the Baby Jane case or something, when an adoptive family, they adopted their child, and then, 10 months later, the court awarded the birth mother back the child. I mean, that doesn't really happen anymore, but it's, it's love and fear, like you were saying before. It's like when you know that there's enough love to go around, and you love yourself enough and love your child, then you don't have to be afraid. And it's fear,
right?
Fear
And
that's
I
in the
think
way.
you go back to that notion of destiny, of things that are meant to be, because in some way I don't know, but maybe you just have to take a look at it and say, when those things happen, there's something about it that's meant to be. And who are we to say it's not? Because when something is meant to be, here's an example of something working out, right? That was meant to be. Well, maybe things are meant to be that don't look like they're working out, but on some level, they're meant to be, so they are working out, even though we can't see it.
Right. I mean, that's my belief in life. I like what I was saying before. I believe personally that we get what we need. It may not be what we want, but it's what we need. And that doesn't mean that I don't, moan and complain when things don't go my way, because I have my troubles just like the rest of us.
Right.
We all do. And
Right.
but it's a trust. I think it just comes down to a trust that somehow, it's not something you can figure out. I have a spiritual teacher that I work with for many years, and Marilyn, I said this on Skywire the other week, but how he's always said that life is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. And I don't, that's, you can't think your way into that. You know, that's not something you could ever logically think about and say, okay, I think I will accept that. You know, it doesn't have anything to do. You just have to know it in your heart, in your being. And I do. I think it's a choice. I think I've had enough experience in my life to know that that's the way that life works. And again, not that bad things don't happen, because it does. But it's something bigger. It's like a choice that I have chosen based on my life experience. I have chosen to believe that. It's like I take that stance. And so when I do, it helps me to, you know, if a particular situation happens that's not going my way, you know, it's not like I don't have feelings about it. It's not like I'm not upset. And, you know, it's not about denying our feelings. I think feelings are meant to be expressed, but that doesn't mean we act on them. You know? But it's not about stuffing them down.
Right. And Amnon had something to say, but before he does that, I just want to say, you know, at some point you have to know, like Brandy knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that there was a daughter out there that was waiting for her, and she could not give that notion up. So you have to know there's some knowingness inside of you that either you know it so strongly that you just know it, you can't give it up, or there's something that makes you give it up. But Amnon has something to say.
Gail, I was going to say, you know, talking about this open
adoption.
Isn't this the reason why people go outside the country? I mean, we have enough babies here, enough kids that are not getting adopted, and people are going to other countries where they know they're not going to hear from the parents as far as coming and taking them back. And I agree with you, it doesn't happen often, but if you are invited to two different parties and you know that one party has somebody in there, one of the guests is really sick that you could get sick from, you don't go to that party because you say, well, yeah, the chances that I'll catch it are 1 in I don't know how many zillions, but no, I'm going to go over there where I know that I'm going to be safe. So the fact that this may be just bad press still does a lot. And it's true that there's always a chance somewhere in the back of your mind that they'll come and take the baby back after you did so much and fell in love with the kid and all that. I mean, how would you feel if somebody came and took it away?
Well, a couple things. I think with that particular situation, and I'm not an expert on it, so I could be wrong, so don't quote me, but I think that there was some sort of glitch in the court system, or like the Baby Jane case or something. But normally, like I know, I could speak from my own experiences. So I live in Massachusetts, and my son was born in New Hampshire, so it wasn't too far away. And so with our the legalities with the adoption, I think it was 4 days. Yeah, it was good. Massachusetts has laws that really favor the adoptive parents, but it's different it goes state by state. But basically, Lucas's birth mom had 4 days where she could change her mind. And then once those 4 days are up, that's it. I mean, she doesn't have that's it. There's no chance of that happening.
That's a different story. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that usually is the story. Although I think that in fact, in Zoe's case, that was in Minnesota. And so in Minnesota, the birth mother has a month. So in that month, the birth parent could come and change their mind. And if you read the book, you'll see that that is exactly what happened. Not with Zoe's birth mother, but with Zoe's birth father is more complex.
Mm-hmm. Well, apparently somewhere in the States, maybe North Carolina, they have a year. And we have kids we have friends that wanted to adopt, and when they were told that, they backed off and they waited and waited until somebody says, you know what, you can go to China or you can go to Russia and get a kid and not have to worry about it. And that's what they did. But that's bad because an American kid could not get adopted in America.
Mm-hmm. Well, to have to wait a whole year, I mean, that's
torture.
I mean, that just doesn't make sense.
That's
torture. I wouldn't do that either. I wouldn't. It's a very vulnerable position to be in, as an adoptive parent. And the book there's a part of this, part of the story really taps into that emotional, what that's like to be feeling like you're just already in love with your own child, and then thinking that somebody could take them away from you. I would never, as an adoptive parent, I would never adopt from North Carolina. I mean, that's like,
So you had that going on in the story, and you had the birth
right.
mother who ended up getting this child back a couple of times.
Three
As
times.
three
Zoe's
times.
birth mother.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go
No,
ahead,
go ahead.
Marilyn.
Go ahead. You tell it.
No, I was just going to say that that Zoe's birth mother, Jess, actually had to say goodbye to her daughter, had to relinquish her not once or twice, but 3 different times. A 17-year-old girl. I mean, no woman should ever have to go through that, no matter how old you are. But she was 17 years old. It's
Yeah.
just, it's quite a story.
There's so many things we could talk about, but
I
how you
know.
captured, how you got a snapshot into the psyche, persona of so many people. I mean, even just your thought process on putting it together. I mean, there were some certain things that you would do chronologically that made sense, but then to be able to capture, each of these people and who they were was really great, because the book's not 500 pages long. I mean, it's 250 something. So, and it's pretty easy read. So I would say you did a great job. What would you tell an up and coming individual who is wanting to write, loves to write, is being called to write? What would you tell somebody?
Oh, okay. I would tell that person to believe in yourself, to never give up. Don't give up. To ask for open criticism about your writing, to actually seek it. Really, really go for that constructive criticism. And I would also say that always write about what you're passionate about. That you may have to, you may write about other things as well, but always keep that line open to write about what you're passionate about, because I feel that helps you to grow as a person and know yourself better. It also makes you a better writer, and it keeps your love for writing. It fuels that, I would say.
That's really wonderful, and that means that goes for a lot of things. So do the work you love to do, write the books about the subjects you love to write about. Find that thing, that passion, and I mean, then it's effortless. I mean, this took 5 years, but you heard Gail, it was somewhat effortless, because it just kind of flowed. Chris wants to know what the hardest part of finding a publisher was.
Oh, that's another conversation for sure. Well, we thought that we would get offers from major publishers, and I had worked with an editor when it came time to figure out how to put this story together, because there were so many pieces of it and so many different levels of the story. So I brought somebody in, and he had been doing this for many years, and he actually thought that we'd get offers from major publishers. And that didn't happen from the big publishers. I wouldn't say major, I'll say big publishers. People are afraid to take chances these days. I don't know how much you're aware of this, but publishing, the industry itself, is just going through like huge changes right now with the advent of self-publishing and printing on demand, and publishers are running scared. They don't even know, like, in certain ways, they don't even know what they're doing. And actually now, so many people are self-publishing. So publishers themselves now are actually forming self-publishing arms. So they wouldn't publish the book for the author, but they would actually help them to self-publish the book. Everybody's trying to scramble around and figure out how to make sense of this changing. Right. It's like a
capitalize on every little bit they can.
Exactly.
Right.
So it took us a while. We did get an offer from one publisher about maybe like 4 or 5 months into looking, and we went with this publisher because I felt that we just needed to get the show on the road here. We also were we wanted to approach Marley Matlin to write the foreword. and we wanted to have a publisher before we approached her. Brandy felt that way, and that makes sense to me. So we just wanted to have a publisher. But then as things were moving along, it just, talk about the listening, it just wasn't getting good vibes. It just didn't feel right. So we got out of the contract with that publisher. That was right when we were doing our Kickstarter.com campaign. As a matter of fact, we had a very successful Kickstarter.com campaign where we raised over $36,000 that we were going to put toward an all-out publicity campaign. There was a particular publicist that we wanted to use. Mm-hmm. So that's why we did the campaign. So we were getting out of the contract with this one publisher while the campaign was going. So that was a little strange. And then once we got out of the contract with that publisher, we weren't really sure what we were going to do. And we didn't feel, for us, we didn't want to self-publish this book. We just didn't feel that was the way to go for us. For other book projects, I think that's definitely the way to go. But we wanted to have a publisher. So at one point but we didn't know what was going to happen. It was very iffy. So at one point I started looking into self-publishing and what it entailed. Just because if we had to do it, we would have done it that way. So we looked into it. But then as it turned out, that was not this past summer, but the summer before that, I was looking into that. But then at the end of the summer, we actually ended up getting offers from 2 publishers. And of course, we went with Ben Bella Books. Mm-hmm. So it was a little nerve-wracking there for a while.
So we only have a few minutes left. So I just want to ask you, so how is the book doing? I mean, is it on a bookshelf? Is it all through a website, through Amazon? How's the book doing?
Well, we think it's doing very well. This is, we weren't expecting an overnight sensation, but our publisher, Ben Bella Books, they're actually in it with us for the long haul, and they see it as a book that's going to, steady word of mouth. As the sales get out, as the word gets out, people will buy the book, and that has been happening. But I do want to say that in terms of Amazon.com, it's actually considered a bestseller in its certain categories, for whatever that's worth, but I think Brandy just texted me this morning, and she said she found out that that I think I could be getting this wrong, but where's my phone? But we're in terms of best-selling books for adoption books for 2014, that we're on that list. I think we're number 14 or something like that. But we're just getting going. As a matter of fact, Brandy is actually on Good Morning Austin today. She's on Good Morning Austin. And I found out earlier, she texted me that it was actually taped this morning. It's going to be on tomorrow. And she was also on Good Morning Dallas. So our publicist is still hard at work for us. And, we're just getting going. But this story, it has to be out. It has to be told. It's bigger than Brandy. It's bigger than me. This story needs to be told. There's something in it for everybody. Yeah. And we're just getting going.
So it really is a great story. It's, the story about how all these families came together, the story about how they love this child, the story about Brandy finding the daughter she has always yearned for, the story about how Tim, the father, had envisioned her. There's so many things in the story that, as much as we've already told you, doesn't hold a candle to what you can actually see. And I don't care if I sat here and told you the whole story. Reading it for yourself, there's something different in that. I mean, just capitalizing the time, and what goes on it's just a miracle. So I highly recommend you read it. Where do they find the book?
Oh, we can find it wherever books are sold, in bookstores and on Amazon.com, and all online outfits as well.
Cool. So do that. Come to our Facebook page and let us know what you think. Come to us on Google Plus and give us a little, message after you've read it. Let me know. If I can be of any help to you at all, click on my name above. That's my email. Send me a message. I'd love to hear from you. We're here every week. I don't know if we're going to be here next week, though, because it's a holiday, but we will be here every week. And Gail, I want to thank you so much for being here. It almost feels like sometimes these hours are fast and furious. There's so much to get in and so much to talk about, but you did a great job. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's my pleasure.
It was great to get the inside scoop. And to everybody out there, have a wonderful, wonderful holiday. We appreciate you all the time. I'm very grateful for having you here. Thank you so much for sharing this day with us and all the days that we're here. Amnon, mwah.
Mwah.
Gail, mwah.
Mwah.
Bye, everyone. See you soon.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, Health In with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Lessons of Vietnam with NCBVI members, The Tanya Love Show, Your Healthy Pet with Gisela DiCarlo. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it at www.nissancommunications.com. Sponsored by Atomus.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters for professionals, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.